Well, welcome to Caring for New Users. I'm excited that you're here. This is amazing. You all obviously care about your products, but more importantly, your users. I'm going to start out with this question, though. How many product deaths occur each year? Serious question. What do you think?
I think they're more in a coma.
They're in a coma. Okay, I like that. Until they pass away. So here's the actual stats. 82 new products released every day. So by the end of today, 82 new products on average are going to be released to the market. 78 of those products will not survive. So every year, there are 28,500 dead products littering this thing called the product graveyard. Who knows of a recent product that did not survive? Thank you for coming to my dead talk. All right, I'm Scott Showalter. I'm no one special. I'm just here to make you and your products and your users more awesome. Now, quick disclaimer, I don't like the term user. Anyone else? A user. But it is easier to say than the humans that use our products, so I will say user. I'm an Agile coach at Ford Motor Company, coaching executives and leaders on product, how to drive more value, because there's a million things we can deliver when it comes to product, but here's the thing, we can't deliver all of it, right? So we have to find the highest value and deliver that. I also run the Agile Career Accelerator, where I help Scrum Masters and Agile coaches double their income. Now, I'm not planning to say anything in particular that's profound, but if I do, you can go ahead and find me on Twitter and tweet it out. Those are my Twitter and Instagram handles, and you can also find me on LinkedIn as Scott Rages. So who are you? By a show of hands, who in here are engineers? Okay. Who in here are designers? Raise your hand if you're a product owner or a product manager. Do we have any Scrum Masters in here? We got one. If you want to double your income, just come let me know. What kind of products do we have? Who's working on a web product? Who's working on a mobile product? Who's saving all their hand-raising energy to clap at the end? All right, so adoption is important, and it's important to the livelihood of our product, but also how we care for our users. And there's several of these. I'll start with pain tolerance, right? There are a lot of impatient people in the world. Raise your hand if you're impatient. These people can be your best friend. These are the people that often in the adoption curve, I don't know if you've ever seen the bell curve, where you've got early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. These are the people that tend to show up at the product party a bit fashionably late. And I want to make one thing clear, this isn't about satisfaction. Like, we can deliver a perfect experience that doesn't satisfy all of the user's needs, and it's about really how much pain can they tolerate. Does that make sense? So we want to be cautious as we proceed forward. Pricing. Pain correlates surprisingly to pricing. Anyone agree? So pricing will always be an adoption obstacle. Who works on a product that charges money? I think that's everyone in here. Here's the thing, here's how I think about this. The pain of the problem has to be greater than the pain of the price. If you're solving a problem that to the vast majority of people isn't extremely painful, then your price point has to be in no way painful. Price experimentation, that's a whole separate discussion, but it's something to be important. It's something to be aware of. Here's the other thing. This is super important, especially in the early stages of your product, which is don't let a cheapskate influence your product. Don't optimize for people who aren't willing to pay. So that I think of this in terms of three currencies, right? Money being one of them. Money is the ultimate currency of validation. But there's two others. Do you know what they are? Yeah, time. Are they willing to give you some of their time to work with you either in the lab? Like, that's a signal that they care about the problem enough to help you solve it in the best way possible. What's the other one? Sort of. It's reputation. If they don't have the problem themselves, do they see it as important enough to solve that they're willing to refer someone to you that would give you their time or their money? Make sense? And money is obviously the reason why Kickstarter exists, or Indiegogo and markets like that. You can actually pre-sell apps now in the App Store. So, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you've probably heard of the term friction. Friction, what does it mean? You're experiencing it now, right? Yeah, resistance or effort, struggle. And who here is not familiar with the term MVP? Minimum viable product. There's some differences about what this actually means. Is it the minimum feature set that we actually need to deliver to customers? I'm on a different end of the spectrum. I think that an MVP needs to be, something in the early stage, like a paper prototype or an interactive prototype that vets out whether we should actually invest time to code anything. And our MVPs can vet any sources of friction in our experience. So get comfortable watching people struggle. If they aren't struggling, then you either nailed it or more likely you're doing it wrong, because 95% likelihood of failure, right? And it comes down to this, right? The harder our product is to use, the fewer people that will. It's that simple. So we want to instill intuitive usage patterns by testing prototypes early and often. Make sense? And then we need to make it easy to find the product, right? Eventually people have to find it, but here's the thing. Most people aren't actively searching. So this is where you discuss with those innovators, the early adopters. Ask them, like, what would you search on? How might you try to find a solution to this problem? Make sense? So, that famous movie, If You Build It, They Will Come, Field of Dreams, right? It's not actually true. Make them come before you build it. Then we want to market to the right groups of people. You can collect email addresses, Facebook page likes, even pre-orders, like I said, through Kickstarter. Money is the best validation that people actually care about the problem. Okay, so if no one comes, you've probably sought after the wrong market. So begin to explore how your solution might impact or solve problems in other domains. Who knows of a company that's not doing what they originally started out doing? Amazon, yep. Here's one you probably didn't realize. Starbucks was not a chain of coffee shops when they started. They started off selling coffee machines. So, and there's tons of digital examples of this too. Instagram was a check-in app when it started. Now it's not. At some point, they stripped all the features away and focused solely on photos. And then they kind of built it back out based on what people wanted. So the best way to care for new users is solving problems they actually care about. Make sense? And here's the thing, because we make assumptions all the time. Who here has been in a meeting where we're speculating without any user input on what it is we're designing or building? Probably everyone in the room, right? And what happens when you assume, right? Say it with me. When we assume, we may get it wrong. What? Did you just assume I was going to say something else involving donkeys? Okay. All right, so pop quiz. Uh-oh, I didn't tell you there'd be a test. you're screwed. What is the first accomplishment a user wants to accomplish with your app or product? Get past the login page. All right, the first thing they want to do is the first thing they want to accomplish is to see if they can accomplish the thing they came to accomplish. I know it's kind of meta, but yeah, don't force people to sign up, right? Login is not what people are excited to do for the first time with your product, right? Don't lose people who haven't even gotten on the boat yet, right? A good example of this, who here goes to CodeMash? A few of you, okay. In 2017, this was the CodeMash schedule. Was anyone there in 2017? Were you also confused? Did you also, like me, not create an account because you were confused as to, do I create an account? Is an account already created for me? I'll just use the paper. How many of you are using a paper schedule today? Okay, we got a couple classy retro guys. That's cool. Most people don't, right? Most people are using something digital, whether it's the phone, the website, that sort of thing. So they improved. This was 2018. It was an app again, but at least this time you didn't have to log in. Now it did warn you, because you could still do things like your favorite sessions and that sort of thing. But it would tell you every time, this data is just being stored locally. Create an account if you want to save it. All right, now there's times when creating an account is unavoidable, but when it's required, you should do something that only one of these is doing. So we got Periscope on the left, Harvest is a time tracking app in the middle, and then Apple Music. But what do you notice? I don't know if you can read it, but what do you see here? Actually, those might be relevant, but the big thing I want to point out is there's a value proposition. So notice Apple is telling you the benefits of doing this. Another thing you want to think about is allow some exploration, right? This is easier to do with mobile apps than web apps, but there's a tool from Google called Firebase that allows this thing called anonymous authorization. So it's basically storing that data. It's creating an account for you without first collecting your email address and all your credentials. And then if you decide to create an account later, it's already there. It just puts your credentials in. When registration is required, make it dead simple, right? And give a clear value proposition for doing so. Learning is a crucial driver in adoption, right? I say it like this: learning is earning, right? Especially for new users. And how do we learn best? By studying? That's not how I learned. I learned by doing. Raise your hand if you learn by doing. I think that's everyone in the room. So how you teach is also crucial. Like, not everyone learns the same way. And I'm sure as experienced craftspeople, we would love to make absolutely intuitive apps that are instantly understood and loved by all every time, but it doesn't happen that much. Learning curves are the reality. So what can we do? Well, we need to be aware of humans. Be cognizant of this thing we have called our human condition. Raise your hand if you have a human condition. Oh my gosh, everyone in the room, again. All right, so here's what that means. Understand that we now have a shorter attention span than that of a goldfish, right? We're easily distracted. Hold on, I got a notification on my phone. Okay. We're easily distracted, and really, we can only hold about 4 to 7 pieces of information in our working memory at any given time. Also, understand that what we pay attention to is primarily based on what we want to accomplish. So we're going to ignore anything else that seems irrelevant, right? So the first thing a user wants to do is to see if they can do what they came to do. Make sense? Raise your hand if you hate reading. I caught you reading the slide just now. All right, we only enjoy reading only what we enjoy reading. Who here has heard of a user-friendly manual? Who here does not read product manuals? 2 hands legitimately raised. Cool. And we thrive on instant gratification. We don't want to work for our rewards. Anyone seen the movie? Raise your hand if you've seen the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Not the new one, but the old one. Yeah. Well, who was the name of that character that thrived on instant gratification? Veruca Salt, that's right. I want it now. So keep that in mind. And we don't like working, right? That's why we're all off work today enjoying this conference. Guilty. All right, our primary reason to work is to solve a pain. So keep all those things in mind, and if you want to learn more, there's lots of other stuff in this book called 100 Things Designers Should Know About People. Who here is a designer? All of you should have your hand raised, because we are all designers. We're designers of information, designers of systems, designers of solutions. So raise your hand here if you're a designer. Wow, everyone in the room. I'm amazed. As a gift, here's a gift for you. Lots of other stuff in book number 2 of this series. Cool. So let's talk about onboarding. Since we can't build those intuitive apps that are instantly understood every time, onboarding is a thing. So what is it? It's training new users how to do stuff. Who's recently seen an app where there was like 4 to 7 swipeable screens of content? Yeah, we see it all the time. Now, do you actually remember any of that content? I think she's saying you remember one thing from there. Probably true. All right, I would like a volunteer. I promise I don't bite. Okay, she's going to volunteer. Okay, you can stay in your seat. That's the cool thing about this. Being in a theater, it's awesome. I'm going to show you a slide, and it's going to have a picture on it, and I'm going to show it to you for about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to ask you a question. You ready? She's ready. What's your name?
Kate.
Kate? Cool. Here we go, Kate. Okay, how did that feel? Do you maybe feel like this? What was it? Compact. Yeah. Do you feel overwhelmed? Who else here feels overwhelmed? It's pretty overwhelming, isn't it? Which direction do you turn? Right? Oh, I'm so sorry. You just hit the pedestrian that was crossing the crosswalk because there was so much cognitive load with you trying to analyze which direction to go that you missed them. All right, let's give it up for Kate, everyone. Cool, so I call this Onslaught Onboarding. Often you'll see it appear before sign up, and let's be clear, this is not supposed to be the value proposition for why a user should use the product. People take this stuff with a grain of salt. I'll go through some examples here, but basically they've already downloaded your app or installed your product or maybe accessed the website. Like you don't necessarily need to keep marketing to them. So this is a coupon app called Ibotta. Basically you can get rebates for anything you buy by taking a picture of the receipt. But it's not really showing you how to do that in the app. Basically what that is again, it's trying to sell the user on doing the thing rather than showing them actually how. I call it remarketing. Don't avoid remarketing. Tell the users how to use the app. So here's another example. There's about 6 swipeable screens here. This is a flight tracking app. So I'll go ahead and let you take this in for a sec. Difference here is that you're swiping the screens up and down instead of left to right, but okay. And then you arrive at the app. So what were the things that you could do with this app? And how did you do them? It's a high likelihood that you probably don't remember. And if you do, I'll tell you why in a minute. But again, people are going to go through those screens that quickly. Here's another example. This is Lyft with scooters. Now, what I do like about this is it keeps it simple, and it also has to convey traffic laws. So everything is simplified into giant headers for the people that don't like to read, and then people who want to dive deeper, they can read more text. Anyone else shop at Meijer? Has anyone used this shop and scan feature? Okay, we have a couple. Nice. I have not actually used it yet because after going through this onboarding, I still wasn't particularly compelled or understood how to actually do it. So, and this was probably invented a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago. Yeah. So these are some examples how you could probably do this better, and we'll get there in a minute. But there's another thing called Onslaught Training. That's what I call it. These are walkthrough flows, guided tours, coach marks. Anyone familiar with those terms? We'll look at this in a minute. But basically, this is about an app called Boximize, and you can create collections of anything you want. Movie collections, art collections, you name it. And when I used this app for the first time, it forced me to go through, it walked me through this step by step, and it actually made me take the steps to create a collection of something, I think a movie collection. So it's walking me through step by step. On every screen, it's giving me a little indicator saying, do this, right? So it's guiding me along the way. It's a guided walkthrough. The one thing I want to point out here is make sure that we program in that the user has already gone through the walkthrough if you use this at all. I don't necessarily recommend using this, but if you do, keep that in mind, because what happened is it forced me to create a second collection and then a third collection because they weren't storing the fact that I had already gone through it once. So, all right, this is Allstate, I think. Yeah, so it's guiding me through. They're really excited, by the way, if you can tell. They're excited to bring me through this is like a guided walkthrough with a little bit of coach marks. There's an issue with these coach marks, I'll tell you in a minute. But basically, it's showing me here's your navigation, here's your policy overview, here's how you contact agents. So this is interesting because it's telling me how to do something that's not on the app. And then help and profile. Now, anytime you have a help section, you can present the option for the user to go through that guided tour, the coach marks again if they need to. And then finally, I'm free to do the thing. Now this is an example of coach marks, and you'll notice this is a little different, right? You see the text looks kind of handwritten. And when it comes to coach marks, usually they're relevant to the sections of the screen. So it's telling me I can tap to read an article, and I can swipe, and it's relevant to that section. I can tap for a mini quote, it's relevant to that section, right? So everything on here is relevant to each section. Again, make them findable again, usually using like a help icon. But all this is overwhelming, isn't it? Who here feels overwhelmed right now? I forgot to bring my fire hose, but do you feel like I'm hitting you with a fire hose? You're going to feel that way at the end of the day if you haven't already. So my question for you, when it comes to your product, are you onboarding? When it comes to these products, are they onboarding? Or are they just informationally waterboarding? Gee whiz. What's the difference? So there's a better way, right? And that's by contextual onboarding. Humans learn best by doing, not studying, right? Who else here did not do their homework in high school, right? Yay, my people. All right. Cool. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what this is, but basically you've got little screens here that pop up. This is Slack when you join the first time. A user might not know what channels means. They might think, TV, what? I'm not watching TV. So they're telling you, they're teaching you what channels are. And then you have the option to learn more, or in some cases learn more, or you can click got it. In this case, you have the option to skip all of that stuff, which is useful if you're a native Slack user. Okay, this is an app called Otter, and the interesting thing here is that it's going to give me a walkthrough of how to review my conversations fast and easily. Watch the wording on this, because do it later kind of implies that I can skip it and see it again. But get started may also be misinterpreted as I just want to get started and do my thing, right? Because again, why do users want to use the app? Because they have something that needs to be accomplished. Okay, this is a fun one. This is, anyone know what app this is? Twitter. It's Twitter. Who would have guessed? You have a camera app inside of Twitter. You can record videos. All right, so I was at the Plymouth Ice Show. I wanted to film a video and tweet it. Okay, so what do? How do we film a video? Hit the red button. Yeah, okay, let's do it. Are you ready to do this together? We're going to hit the red button. Okay, boom. Okay, we hit the red button. Awesome. Oh, what's this? Hold down longer to record? Okay. I guess I did it wrong. Okay, that's okay. We can do this again. Who's ready? Let's do this. Okay, we're going to hold the button down this time. Okay, we did it. Woo! All right. Oh, I can record more. I didn't know that. Okay. Everyone ready to record more? What do? Hit the red button? Oh, yes, we got to hold it down. How many of you forgot that already? It's like the whole room. Okay. So that's an example of like teaching them when it makes sense for them to learn. All right. There's other things like this is, as you're scrolling through, right, help people learn what's possible when they might otherwise pass a capability by. Who knew that you could tap on? By the way, users generally don't know what an icon means if there's not text there. So that's what I like about this example is you get to see that little, and it's blue. It's different color than anything else on the screen. So you got to make sure that it's different. It needs to be novel. Novelty creates focus. Right? That's super important, by the way. If you take nothing else away from this session, what creates focus? Novelty. All right. This is, I think that was Adobe Spark. I had the option when I got to this screen for the first time to either remix those posts or create my own. What I like about this is it has the option where I can watch a video. What I don't like about this is that it doesn't have a close button, and that's a potential point of confusion for people because people aren't that sophisticated. All right, this is a Hootsuite. You can schedule posts, but Instagram doesn't let you schedule posts. So it's telling me I'm going to get a notification at the time that it's time to share my Instagram post. When I tap on that, Hootsuite is going to actually push the content into Instagram for me. And then here's an example of coach marks, but it's simplified, right? It's relevant only to the elements on the screen at that time, but also you can see there's only like 2 elements on the screen. And it's just another example that coach marks, they can be sexy, right? Now keep in mind, they should look handwritten. So that's my only complaint here is that text doesn't necessarily look handwritten. And then you want to limit your onboarding, your contextual onboarding to no more than 3 to 4, right? Because of our working memory, as we said earlier. So this is just a couple examples of that. This was an app where you could scan 3D objects, and then when you are done, it tells you what you can do. And then as you're going, once you're done and you're happy, oof, did we lose it? All right. Okay, we're back. By the way, really cool app if you have a Mac. It's called, what is it called? I can't remember the name. So make your app name memorable. But if you've ever missed a meeting, what it does is it presents the notification for the meeting and it covers the entire screen. Sorry, Marius. We'll meet on Monday. Okay, cool. So teach them when it makes sense for them to learn. Quote by a famous guy. If everyone's got it, just click on that button over there and we're good to go. So avoid information overload. Don't let your first impression of your experience be an onslaught of information overload. Avoid cognitive load. And avoid bad first impressions. In fact, just avoid potential confusion whatsoever. Like this guy who was putting his mail in the dog poo box for 2 years because it looked like a mailbox. A little example of where is my data going to go when I put it up. So this was going live on Facebook for the first time. I could put the content on my post, on my feed, on the story, right? And then on the left here, I could pick who saw it too. So another example of contextual onboarding. Let's talk about this thing called permission pouncing. That's what I call it. Basically, have you ever seen this? Like you get a prompt for something, and then you get another prompt, and then you get another prompt, and another prompt, and another prompt, and another prompt, and then finally, I can do the thing that I came to do, which is to see if I could do the thing that I came to do. Just another example of just excessive prompting for permission to do stuff. This is more relevant than mobile apps than web apps, but you're starting to see it with Chrome coming a long way as far as capabilities. We want to do this instead, which is permission priming. I call it asking people to ask for permission. Cool. So here's an example of that. We've got 3 screens here. These are like onboarding screens, but they're giving a clear proposition why they need access to whatever it is they're asking for access for, and then I have to actually tap to get that prompt. So when I tap enable, it's going to then prompt me for the location access. And then in some instances, so these are the next 3 screens of the same app, I can skip past those. But if I click allow, I'm probably going to click allow on the native prompt. Another example of this is just putting an arrow to the thing that you want the user to tap, right? That decreases cognitive load. Here's the Imgur app. Who uses Imgur in here? It's a really cool app if you're into humor and memes. I call them GIFs, and I know I'm triggering someone right now, so I call it Imgur, but some people might call them GIFs, so they might call this Imgur. This is a judgment-free square here on the floor. I'm not going to judge you when I'm in here. Maybe when I walk away, but definitely not inside this box, because it's being recorded. Cool. So you could see they're doing the same thing, right, with the arrow. Now, they didn't do it over here, but why do you think that is? Well, because I tapped allow photo access. So again, it's like that other pattern with enable. Okay, I'm going to probably do the thing, right? So ask for permission, not forgiveness, because apps can't do the inverse like a spouse can. And since apps can't ask for forgiveness rather than permission, the next best thing to do is ask if you can ask a question. Cool. Can I ask you guys a question? Who wants to learn about empty states? I call this making nothing useful. You're like, Scott, what do you mean by that? Well, here's what I mean. Here's an example of where screens that have nothing on them, they may look good, but they're not useful. Here's some more. They made them look fancy, they made them look pretty, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't help the user understand how to fill that area with actual content. So there's a couple more examples of what not to do. All right, here's an example of what to do. You can see on the left here we have another app that involves collections, and it preloaded something. It gave me a sample collection to start with. And then on the right, when I'm going to a similar screen, I think these are two different apps. On the right, it's giving me a way to fill whatever screen I'm looking to fill, probably my favorite shows screen. And then I can just tap the most common ones. It's showing the most common ones, by the way. It doesn't make sense on this screen to show like A to Z, because that's a lot of work to get to my favorite shows. These are probably going to be the top favorites. Who here is a Game of Thrones fan? Yeah, it's like half the room, right? Anyone else like Breaking Bad? The Walking Dead? Big Bang Theory? Dexter? Okay, I didn't think anyone would like that, but you get the point, right? I think we've gathered at least 3/4 of the room with all of those, so just a simple example. But here's the thing, teach them to fill the void. So here's Harvest, the time tracker app that we mentioned earlier. Every day is going to be an empty state. Every day is going to start with nothing there, and we need to help the user and make it easy for them. So there's a button right there, add new entry. That makes it very simple. The other thing here is that it's using something called Charm. Anyone here familiar with Charm? We have one. That's actually quite rare. So Charm is just being more human with your product, showing that there are people behind it and it's not just a robot here to do the thing or help the people do the thing. We'll see more examples of that, actually. All right, this was iCloud when iCloud Drive came on the scene. I had to upload my documents for the first time. I needed to enable documents and data. Here's another example. I can start importing photos. I can start importing movies. And yet another example. This is adding payment methods to Google Payment Center. Another example of Charm, because they're making it more human. They're showing the team behind it, possibly. You've got the ping pong. And when you're ready to serve it up, to enjoy Google products and services, add payment method. Now, I have no idea, that it's kind of doesn't make sense when you're ready to serve it up, but add payment method, it's there. And I wanted to walk you through this because there's something interesting in here. It's called showing you my credit card number so you can go out and buy yourself a little gift afterwards. All right, so we're going to add we have the option, credit card, debit card, add a bank account, that sort of thing. So let's add a credit card. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to type the number in. You got your memory? Okay, here we go. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you can't buy a gift. But what's cool about this screen? What's useful about this screen? Because it's different than the first screen, isn't it? What it's doing is it's using that grid design that they're going to use when I add more payment methods to add the call to action right in the next one, right? So it's kind of prompting me visually that this is where the next one's going to go. All right, back to Imgur again. This is like if a user made a mistake or a misstep or didn't do the thing that they needed to do, just be clear about it, right? I only picked 3 things. I didn't know that I had to pick 5, but it told me, pick 5 more tags to follow. Okay, that's pretty simple. And then once I meet those conditions, what happens? What do you see here on this third screen? The button turns green. Here's the thing, though. How many of you have buttons in your apps that are possibly disabled until certain conditions are met? Do not disable those buttons. Just redirect them to a different thing, right? If I had tapped this grayed out button and it did nothing, how confused would I be if I wasn't a savvy tech user? Really confused. I'd be like, why isn't this app working? And then I'm going to go do what? Something else. Yeah, probably. I might give it a negative review, for example. So disabled buttons should actually be secretly enabled, but then give the user some kind of feedback. Cool. And now we can see our feed. Here's another example of an empty state: search screens. If you're working on a mobile app, for example, and you have a search tab down there, most of that, you might think that screen is okay to be empty, and the truth is not so clear, right? Help the user discover perhaps some things. Instagram does this also. And then there are screens when it just makes sense to display not nothing, but at least something that helps the user understand, when is this screen going to be filled? Cool? And then, of course, we've talked about this before, but give them a value proposition to use new functionality or especially hard-to-use features. Raise your hand if your product has a hard-to-use feature. That's probably 25% of the audience. A couple common examples for you. Hopefully, raise your hand if you have a LinkedIn account. Yay. Raise your hand if you do not have a LinkedIn account. We forgive you, but you should go there because it's, I agree. I thought LinkedIn was the dumbest idea when it came out. I'm like, who wants to talk about work for fun? But I've gotten massive pay increases because of it, and this is an example of LinkedIn wants you to write articles on their platform. So when you haven't written an article and you land on that screen, they're giving you huge value propositions. In fact, it's so important to them, and they think it's so important to you to write articles that they have a video. They're probably going to sell you on the fact that you should write articles. And then here's another example. This is an empty state. Another example of a LinkedIn empty state, which is when you go to the messaging screen, you'll see reasons to message certain people, right? Especially since that middle column's probably going to be empty. So this guy's having a work anniversary, these people are having birthdays, great conversation starters. And then value propositions work for permission priming too, like what's in it for me. So give a clear value proposition why they need access to the location data, and then allow them to choose. And if they choose not now, the benefit is that you can prompt them again later. If you just send them the native prompt, at least on iOS, you cannot prompt them again. They're going to have to go in the settings, and it's so much harder to enable that permission. So let's talk about problem states real quick. What we need to do here, anytime there's an issue, you need to clearly communicate the problem and whether the user can fix it and how they should. So, example here, this is signing up for a Verizon account. Well, this user ID has been taken. Actually, it's funny that that user ID has been taken because someone owns that user ID. What do you see here, though? What do you see? Charm. It's not exceptional charm, but it is an example of charm. Be more creative. A robot wouldn't tell you to be more creative. That's like the first condition of whether or not you're a robot, because robots, by definition, cannot be creative. Actually, someone's probably going to debunk that in an AI session later today. But all right, another problem with that 3D scanner app. It couldn't detect it, so it needed to tell me I needed to have the mat flat when I go to scan. This is kind of meta here. I was creating this session, and this prompt popped up. I was about to make some fancy transition, and it needed to make sure that I had two slides that have at least one object in common. So I'm like, okay, I gotta screenshot this. Now we see it. Okay, cool. Your disk is full. This was a common issue earlier before we had like bigger phones with bigger storage, but this is a problem on my end. It's not a problem on Dropbox's end. Although arguably you could say it's a problem on their end, because why are they using so much of my space? Not as common an issue, but still a good example. Okay. Question for you, is this a good error message? I see, I get a yes and a no. What do you think? Good, bad, thumbs up, good, thumbs down, bad? Okay, I'm seeing mostly thumbs down. Good, yeah, you're right. This is a terrible empty state alternative. How could this be a good experience? Like, take me to the folder and allow me to fill it, right? Don't tell me that it's empty. I don't know how to fill it. All right, is this a good empty state? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? I'm seeing mostly thumbs up. Actually, this is a terrible empty state because I know something is crashing in this moment, and I go here and it's saying no sign of a crash, but it's not helping me understand, like, if I'm expecting something to be here, where the disconnection is. Speaking of disconnection, let's talk about disconnected states. This is still an issue, right? When people aren't connected to the web or their connection is slow, there's still, raise your hand if you still experience cellular weak spots. And this is the 5G world that we're living in. So this will continue to be a reality. We need to make sure that we account for this. Also, right, whether we have Wi-Fi enabled and Wi-Fi is glitching, or maybe we disabled cellular and Wi-Fi altogether and we're in airplane mode, we need to account for those. So this is Dropbox. You can see here, that was a fancy transition I mentioned earlier, by the way. The message here is this might take a while. I was trying to download 50 gigabytes of data from Dropbox. I just went on a trip to Miami and had a filmography crew follow me around. They were trying to get my content to me. My internet, by the way, I have super fast, it's like, I don't know, 50, 60 megabits per second, whatever the faster of that is. And it was still not fast enough to download multiple things at a time. So Dropbox, way ahead of the curve on that, but it's clearly communicating to me what I need to expect. Okay, permission denied states, right? We talked about this earlier. If you prompt the user and they deny your permission, then what happens? They have to go into the settings now. So you have to communicate that somehow. So here's an example of that. Microphone access denied. Unable to access the microphone, you need to go to settings. And what are they doing here? They're having a typo. No, I'm kidding. But they're giving the user the ability to go directly into the settings where they need to make that change. So definitely do that. Have your engineering team do that if they can. Okay, busy states. This is a good example of other solvable issues, but this was eBay. On the left here was the screen I was being presented, and on the right was the screen that I wanted, because I knew that I had made purchases in the last 60 days. So don't mislead users by giving them a bad empty state when you should be giving them a waiting state instead. So show a freaking spinner, eBay, come on. This is 2022 we're talking about. Here's an example. I was trying to put a photo in, and this is in Keynote here, and it's trying to access all of my photos, like the last decade of photos from my iPhone. It's going to take a while. By the way, this shouldn't happen. You should show content sequentially, so show the most recent photos, for example, and then older and older and keep going. And but for whatever reason, they didn't do that. We should all go work for Apple and fix this issue, right? Because this just literally happened. But at least it's showing me a spinner, right? So it's trying to do something. Okay. Let's talk about the what's new UX, right? If things have changed in a particular update, tell people what's new, right? So here's the new iPad Notes update. Had this feature called Scribble, where you could write with the pencil, you could write your words, you could scratch it out. The cool thing is that they actually allowed you to do that. So I could take my Apple Pencil and I could scratch out a word to delete it, right there in the prompt. So we learn by studying? No, we learn by doing. So let them do it. This was Netflix when they announced the ability to download content. So when I updated the app and I went in, it's, okay, I can download new content. And I have the option. I can go find something to download now. I get to try it. So I did, and we had a range of movies you've heard and movies you probably haven't heard. All right, when pricing changes, you should probably let them know, especially if you have a freemium business model and maybe you offered lower subscription rates. You want to let people know, especially on that freemium level. Freemium meaning there's a free tier and then there's paid tiers. And then this is just an example of coach marks, but also with that new user experience, right? So there's a change, something's new. It's using coach marks to guide me as a user. And what do you see here? Are they doing it the right way? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Interesting. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs down. I don't think this is so bad, though. We can talk after what you see, but what it's doing here is it's showing what the new elements are, and it's just allowing the user to read. Now, maybe the complaint is that there's a lot of text here, so conciseness is important. Is that kind of what you were thinking? Yeah, okay. Cool. So Imgur again, when something changes, it's showing me, like, here's the menu, and it's spotlighting. Here's where the thing is. And by the way, even when that spotlight goes away, I'm going to see a new badge next to it. So every time I see that for a while, I'm going to see, oh, this is the new thing. Do they need to do something when there's an upgrade? Give them the option to do that. Give them a clear value proposition for doing so. And give them the option not to do it if it is avoidable. And don't do this. Forced updates are a bad example, especially because of what? The disconnected state, right? People are going to be in low cellular signal areas or have other connectivity issues. And what do they want to do? They just want to do the thing that they came to do. And if you're forcing an update, then, and they're in a disconnected area or they're having connectivity issues, they're going to be frustrated because they can't update the app fast enough and they can't do the thing that they came to do. And how patient are people? Pretty impatient. Okay, so give them the option to do it later. And give them the option to do it contextually, maybe after they've finished their thing that they came to do. And don't ever do this, which is show a blank screen, require them to update, but the screen doesn't actually do anything. That was a frustrating experience. Just needed to vent. Okay, here's a nice example. WhatsApp gives you 30 days to update. So I'm going to see this probably every time I load the app. I have the option to go update, but I can dismiss it, go make that message that I'm probably going to forget by the time that I've updated the app, by the way, so keep that in mind. Let's talk about visual cues for learning real quick. This isn't necessarily onboarding, but it's important for discoverability, because I think everyone in this room is a fan of usability and accessibility. Give it up for usability and accessibility. Whoop whoop. So this was an accessibility issue, actually, if you think about it. But basically, if you move things around in your interface, you need to make it very clear where you moved things to, right? So this was an example. Google Maps had moved something, and when I loaded the menu, it would tell me satellite and traffic layers have moved. But when I tapped on that, I'm like, where did it move to? I can't find it. Where is it? Why couldn't I find it? Could you find it? Probably by now. Like, it took a few times, right? Here, we'll play that one more time. So make sure that your visual cues, the animation up there, and you can see it hopefully in the top right corner. It might have taken you a while, like it did me, but that was too subtle. And if you're moving something entirely from one end of the screen to the other, you probably want to have a much greater visible cue. Make sense? Because if it doesn't make sense, it's not going to make dollars. Okay, feedback herding. So essentially this is the formula here. People don't naturally leave feedback unless they're prompted. But what prompts a user to leave feedback? And by the way, web apps have feedback now. It's called Trustpilot, Google reviews, you name it. So people are leaving reviews for your app, but what typically prompts them to leave feedback? Bad experience, exactly. Don't do that. So basically, we want to prompt the user to leave a review, right? So here's an example of that. This is a Tide app. It's like a noise generator, environmental sounds, that sort of thing. The interesting thing here is they're kind of like subconsciously priming you to leave a 5-star review. But here's the important thing. If you like Tide, they're going to encourage you to leave a review. What happens if you don't like Tide? Are they going to let you leave a review? No, they want to know about it, right? So if we have products, we want to know if a user is struggling. And outside of like that MVP where we watch them struggle, we want to know once it's in their hand if they're still struggling. Here's another example of a website, like a web app. So you can actually send them to Google to review your product, right? Or Trustpilot, whatever you use, right? But in this case, it's asking, how would you rate your experience? If I give it 5 stars, it's probably going to suggest that I go rate it on Google. If I give it like 2 or 3 stars, it's probably going to say, well, why did you encounter that? Okay, let's get you some help. And here's the amazing thing, right? I worked with the team on the Lincoln Way app that uses like phone as a key and other cool stuff. When I started working there, the app rating for that app was 1.3, and it wasn't a terrible app. Like, it was an okay app, probably the world's okayest app, if I had to be honest. And we implemented this feedback herding, and it went from 1.3 to 3.3 just in 1 week. And as you can see now, it's hovering around 4.5 stars, because it's a great little app. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about just a little bit is the concept of habit formation. We want to keep our users coming back. We want our app to kind of be like crack, right? Maybe. And I'm only referring to the white lines in the UI. Okay, maybe not. But there's this thing called the hook model. I'll tell you a little bit more where you can go find more information about this, because there's more to it than I can teach here, but it probably demands its own session. But again, there's a book, you can go learn more about it. But basically, how many apps do you think are deleted the next day? And this is in context to the phone, but you know, the same principles apply to the web. It's about 40 to 60% are either deleted the next day or abandoned. Do we have any app hoarders here? Again, I'm inside the judgment-free zone, so I promise not to judge. But it's a thing, right? On average, there are only about 9 apps that people regularly use on their phone. So you want to think about how you can create habit-forming experiences. Again, there's a lot to that. This is an example of when there is money to be exchanged inside the app. One of the things you can do is not make it dollars or cents. So in this case, you can purchase beans, and it's not dollar for bean in this case. So what that does is it actually encourages people to come back, because they're like, oh shoot, I got like 392 beans left, I got to use that. Some apps will use sound when there's like rewards and things like that, and that can help, right? That's why casinos make so much money, because people love the sound of winning. So here's the book. Basically, the concept is habits are done with little thought, but habits cannot be created. They must be built upon existing habits. And then there must be a trigger, a catalyst for action. So those could be push notifications, indicators and app icon badges, advertisements, emails, tweets, that sort of thing. And then the steps to action must appear simple. So actions will follow a trigger, and then usually if there's a reward, people will probably do it more. And the more variable the reward is, the higher payout you'll typically see. So it's a weird thing. There's a whole experiment with rats where when the reward for pressing the button was random, they were just always pressing the button pretty much till they died or got their reward. So we want to remove any predictability to those rewards. Okay. And then investment, like if people invest into the app or into the product, for example, not just like putting money in or beans, but also like creating content into it, they're more likely to stick around than jump to a competitor in the future simply because it's a lot of work to have to move. Finally, use hooks for good and not evil. And then understanding how to make your habit-forming product is going to require you to understand the user and their need. All right, we've made it to the final. I hope you all pass. Don't shout out answers here, just raise your hands if you think you know. What are the 3 things this app can do? It's the app we explored in the beginning. Okay, I'm not seeing a single hand in the room, and that concerns me because there should be at least a few of you, because this app only does 3 things. It's not like it does 7 things or 10 things or 190 things, right? So keep it simple and help them learn experientially. We'd probably remember a lot more if we actually done it together, right? Who remembers how to use the Twitter video app? Yeah, because we did what? We failed together, and we learned together, and that learning was contextual. So users don't have a hive mind. They have their mind, and we have to be cognizant of that. So my final question for you is, what is your New Year's resolution, your new UX resolution? Because your New Year's resolution probably been desolated. But what's your new UX resolution when you get to work Monday morning to create more impact for your users? And thank you to our sponsor, impact.com. Thank you very much. And if there is some kind of feedback loop, is there? The Slack channel. Put your feedback for this session. If you loved it, go ahead and put feedback in there. If you hated it, come see me afterwards. We'll talk. All right, thanks for coming. Have a great day.